In this video, I want to have a look at the vision tricks I made many years ago, but applied and adapted to the modern game. We are going to talk about 8 must-use and must-know vision approaches and tricks that you can use to remain invisible and of course surprise enemies with extreme positioning, excellent picks, and applying a lot of those MIA pings when you show up from nowhere. Remember, while this will be jungle focused because this is our job, if you are a mid laner or specifically support, all of these things are absolutely crucial to the success of your role, specifically those with the sightstone, because chaining together vision, understanding how to manipulate the map with your jungler, this is crucial for success as well. So do please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoy something and learn something from the video. Don't forget my live jungle companion tailored to your specific jungler is available on Zerda.gg. We have 10 champions, many more coming your way by the end of the month, as well as coaching VODs and signups available on Patreon. And now without further hesitation, let's begin. The biggest tip I had in the first version of this video was all about the pixel bush. Of course, back then it was very common for us to do a red into an opposite side scuttle because it spawned so early, and we were really focused on those level 2 gankings and obviously surprising enemy laners once that clear became predictable. However, it is a much more vision and fog of war abuse strategy that people are just not using nearly as much. You know, you can go ahead and do a scuttle and someone comes on over and snacks it away from you because they understand the vision cues and the fog of war available to them. It also allows you to set up excellent traps against moving supports, moving bot laners, moving junglers, and if you have the advantage, the lead, the burst combo, you can really chunk people out and force them to back away from the river, allowing you to get tempo control for dives, for dragons, and so on. And in essence, this is the tight pathing you need to try and use every single time you use that pixel bush to move through the river, and it's also why I love to put a control ward there when I do the herald, because laners and junglers will always move up to the herald through the middle of the bush, which has become sort of a habit that people do, but they don't really understand why. If you look at the vision available when you're standing on the left side of the pixel bush, you will notice on the top side of the map that there's this nice little back end of it where there's just no vision. Any jungler or any laner who knows you might be in that vicinity will use this tight pathing through the middle to surprise you should you face check the bush. This is a crucial concept when both junglers or both champions are moving towards the bush at the same time, but one will reach it before the other. They will have that element of surprise that the other does not, unless of course they hit it at the same time, in which case an explosion of tank damage or no damage. And the same thing applies on the other side of the map and of course on the other side of the bush. So pay attention to the mask, pay attention to the lasers, look where that fog of war is in your advantage, and always approach from that side if you expect someone to perhaps show up in a way that means you can be undetected. However, you don't also have to think about only the pixel bush in that situation. You also need to think about the entire area of that ward. A ward on the side bush there can do a lot more than the pixel bush because it's expected, and obviously you can sneak in there, snack a crab away, and when people understand that you could be in that side bush or the pixel bush, they will push crabs, they will move in a way that you are blocked by 2 brushes or bushes, whichever one you choose, by the time you get into the river. And that's where a lot of heralds are snacked away, and you know, I've done the snacking and I've been snacked again because you're just a bit lazy with your pathing, and you don't push and control the scuttle in a way that allows you to actually secure it when you don't have smite. Mostly though, it's very common to see laners put a ward in the side bush there, and when people in low elo, you can pick any low elo game, they move from one side of the jungle through the river to the other side, they just go in a straight line. Now what you want to be doing is always maintaining that tight pathing, and we will reference this in the 4th point of this video, but please ensure when you are moving from one side of the jungle to the other, you are always doing a little bit of a bracketed style pathing to make sure that if there is a ward in the side bush of the mid lane, you are circumventing it with all of your might. And even if, you know, someone places a control ward in this side bush there, you can see from the Yi here, he just takes absolute lazy pathing and he gets spotted, which thwarts his attempt at a level 3 gank bot lane. Why he is doing that, I know not, but it would have worked had he just had good tight pathing, understanding that you always need to respect the possibility of wards being in those positions. As great as the abuse of those fog of war and tight pathing around the pixel brush can be, the whole concept is to remain as hidden as possible, and I'm seeing a lot of junglers with lazy pathing over wards, into lanes. They're not concerned about hiding because junglers have been so good at equal and opposite. I see you topside, I take a dragon. Yeah, but what about paying attention to minion movement so that we can slide and shadow around the mid lane and around the entire map without being seen? I've literally had high elo players and high elo gameplays on my other channel showing how they don't even acknowledge this and they just go ahead and, you know, show and telegraph exactly where they're going. Great junglers will severely punish you for this through tracking and obsession over counter jungling your camps. And it all starts, my friends, from your first clear, because you must understand this. If you do red into a reverse clear, for example, just red into Raptors, you're cutting across the mid lane and you see that it's pushed against you, you know, because Akshan's such a degenerate champion, you really have to do that bracketed clear again where you kind of move in, dip down, go horizontally, and then dip back up. Another reason for this is because if you just walk blindly without paying attention to the minions and you hit them and you distort their paths, remember, they're on one mission and one mission only. When that minion wave does arrive in the mid lane, lane and the enemy mid laner sees this and it's distorted and not evenly spread out, they are going to know that the enemy jungler crossed through mid lane at that time, and of course you can use that for tracking. Which junglers will do this and which mid laners will do this? Only the best of the best, because it's not a detail that people really acknowledge. So please do your best to avoid any pushing vision. Do not get spotted crossing the mid lane on your first clear. It is absolutely useless, pointless, and it only ends up hurting you. Likewise, when you're counter jungling Krugs or you're doing a 3-camp invade of someone who's ganking top lane for some particular reason and you're getting all 3 quadrants in the first rotation, just don't get spotted, keep that advantage, and use that for great ganking angles. We saw this from the Diana in the video last year. Really good use of mid lane shadowing, push and pull. Almost a subsection of the previous point, but it's also the third point. Really, mid lane is like your highway for animals. You know, once all the cars go away, the hedgehogs can cross, and there's no cars, we don't see them cross, but they did cross. If you're crossing when all the cars are going, you're most likely to be a little bit of a swatted hedgehog. I wanted to say squash, but some imagery came to mind and then I got sad. And when junglers don't really pay attention to good pathing practices, they kind of telegraph everywhere they're going, they don't hug the walls, they don't know about the pixel bush and the side bushes that we discussed in the first point, and you've already taken a dragon, then you can just go across the mid lane as your Yasuo pushed it nicely and go and take the herald directly. So already a large amount of punishment happening here in objective secures just by using a little bit of vision trickery. Or as we call it, just abusing fog of war fundamentals by paying attention to lane states and really memorizing exactly where the break-even points are on the mid lane so that we can shadow those no matter what the situation, whether it's taking a scuttle crab on one side and going to the other, or simply moving from one side of the quadrant to the other to counter gank so they don't know we're coming. It doesn't really matter, my friends, just pay attention to the shadowing of the push and pull of the mid lane and you will get a lot of kills and a lot of efficiency from moving one side of the map to the other. Now for the fourth thing, you know, the tight pathing that I mentioned, if you just adhere to tight pathing no matter what, you can see this Nocturne here. Is it warded in the side bush? I have no idea. If it is, I don't want to be spotted, so I'm just going to adhere to tight pathing no matter what, show up in the bot lane for a surprise gank, they go, but it's control warded, and then we realize, of course, hey, this control ward isn't that great. What always adhering to tight pathing allows you to do is move around potential vision and common vision, and that's why unique ward placements are usually better. This is also fundamental when you're a support and you want to move around the map for roam timers. You kind of have to maximize the ability to use tight pathing, firstly by understanding where things are warded, but also by circumventing warding by just moving around known warded places. Junglers who gank, the same thing applies to you. Use your Hex Flash, use your mobility to go around potential vision cues, and just make sure you have that angle of approach for your ganks. This is great if you know where it's warded and how you can get around it. You can do this just by moving into the jungle and moving around the top and then getting a great angle of approach in the mid lane to gank at Vladimir, as you just saw from the support position. That's because wards were known to be placed in the river and the pixel bush, and of course we're not going to walk through that now because he'll back off. But strict adherence to good tight pathing will always give benefits, whether it's avoiding vision in the mid lane or even in the top lane. And I actually had footage from this. You can see this Mundo ganking a Darius, sticking tight to the wall in case it was warded in the side bush. And I was going to talk a lot about this, but Coach Aragon just uploaded a video I saw on Reddit of 369 putting a control ward, you know, way too far down the bush. And then the Sejuani shows up way too late considering it was warded, and you're thinking, wait a second, you placed a ward, shouldn't have given vision? Yes, but that's not so good if you know you have a jungler that could be ganking from that side specifically early and you want to auto push your lane. If you're more classically in the middle of your lane, and of course you're going to keep it that way and let it push into you, then it doesn't really matter as much because they're going to have to go through a river or at least take a wide angle of approach as it is. But hey, you can go and listen to that video as well, just a nice little chest nugget of wisdom on vision, and basically says what I was going to say about them having 900 range, and obviously you can see where exactly a ward is going to hit when you're going to place it. If you just hover it, you can see that. But the Sejuani, you know, even if she knows it's warded, she's not going to know that that control ward was placed so far down in the lane. She just knows that it is warded, and so she's going to have tight pathing, and in case it isn't warded very well, will have the element of surprise. And even if she doesn't have the element of surprise, you want that to be a great angle of approach to a hard pushing lane. The same thing goes for the Mundo example, and of course you would have seen the Yi getting punished again just by taking piss lazy pathing for an invade. And you know how the enemy team knew this? Well, of course. And that's why I love to place control wards and wards around where the jungle's tracking, because obviously I play support and jungle. I play very well around the jungle, and I always put wards where the enemy jungle is going to be so we can track his body language, and that's a crucial thing here. Body language. It's very, very important to understand when you move, what is the enemy team doing in reaction to your movement? You can usually learn a lot about when something's warded or not, and you can also learn nothing because, you know, you could walk through a ward in your Raptors and the enemy areas won't look to see what you're doing and will just keep on farming while you can gank. But the biggest tip on that is always watch pathing when people leave vision. It's one of the most fundamental aspects of the game. Watch, click the map F keys, click on the minimap, doesn't really matter what you're doing as long as you're looking around and you're not on locked cam. As soon as a Karthus leaves vision, as soon as someone leaves vision, where are they going? Where are they heading? As soon as I run away from a scenario and act like I'm leaving completely, I misdirect them. Misdirected intent, very, very huge. and they telegraph exactly where they're going to go, well, now that can be an interception point, a cutoff point, and you can have great advantages gained just by doing this very, very frequently. I mean, it's not really a trick, right? It's just a case of a tip. Please just watch people's body language and predict where they're going to be. Extrapolation. And that's why your scuttle vision gaps for the 6th point are so damn important. We've talked about this a lot, but Canyon was one of the first people to really accentuate this, and of course, Kirei-sama on E-West a couple of years ago really was ahead of his time in terms of tight vision pathing around the scuttle crab and bottom lane bush wards. Now, in this situation, if you expect someone to come from their blue side and gank down through the scuttle vision that you have, then placing that ward, unlike of course 365 on the top lane, as high up in the bush as possible would be best. You don't anticipate someone flanking you all the way from behind, but if you knew it was warded there as a jungler, yes, you could of course just go the long way around, good pathing around there, into their jungle, hippity-hoppity to the plant, and then cut through from behind. But as long as you know where you can kind of go through that wall on the top side Herald Pit and walk around, you can always avoid being detected as you move to the top lane. And of course, as I covered in coaching recently, don't forget you can still do the great pull-out trick and kind of do that Herald in that fog of war gap between the wards that the enemy team have placed. And when it comes to ganking top lane, ganking bot lane, and kind of moving in between those visions just laterally, it gives you the best angle of approach to get into lanes to try and, you know, get in a position where they're not going to escape from you. But at the same time, obviously, if it's warded up, they're going to see you. However, what most players, supports and junglers included, don't do is chain together vision. Look at this map, for example, excellent control word usage. You put it in a certain place in the bush. And again, my vision video still covers all of these positions. I will link that below. It's old at this point, but locations of wards and bushes hasn't really changed that much. And I go over the whole concept of where you want to place it depending on what you want to cover. So I will link that below as well. But if you can follow and track one person going from one place to another, then it's really easy to study the body language because they're always in vision. You can always see them. But using the full 10-second of your scanner is huge. If you know people have been in your jungle, activate that, move on through the entire zone where you want to walk, get the full value from that scanner, and then you can chain ward afterwards to see approaches. And the chaining together of vision through control wards, sight stones, trinket wards, and obviously using scanners to deny is how we avoid a lot of these tricks being used against us. But most people, 99.99% of people, don't pay attention to vision tricks, don't pay attention to fog of war gaps. And as a final note here, I'd like to use myself as a violator of this principle. Please pay more attention to the bot lane alcove. When you're moving in, depending on when the minion wave is, remember, you want to move into the back of the bush when the minion wave and champion are very clearly nowhere near the entrance of it on the other side. Otherwise, you will be detected. And obviously, when you're cutting into the first one, make sure it's a nice 90-degree cut or float on from the backside. Junglers are lazy with this, supports are lazy with this, and hugging the back against the wall there is way more important than it was when we only had 2 brushes, but that's because they're a lot shorter, and obviously much more discipline is necessary around the alcove. But as you can see, not everyone really pays attention to the small things and end up dying anyway. But there you have it, just a good refresher on very, very important tight pathing tips and fog of war gaps that you can abuse and use to make sure you remain invisible and hidden as a jungler in Season 12 going into Season 13 and for the indefinite future. If you want to understand the omnivore style of life, please click the video in the top right. If you want to understand how to balance ganking and farming, please click the video in the box in the bottom left.